Ryan, welcome to the show. Thanks for calling in. So, what are your thoughts on this college football playoff chaos?
I think the committee finally got it right.
Do you think the committee got it right? Okay, a
Yeah, for
different
the most
opinion
part.
here. We like different opinions. We welcome different perspectives. So, please, you have the floor. Tell me why.
I mean, one through probably 7 or 8, I think was never a doubt to anybody. The only contentious spot was 12, and
Yeah,
I said this when they made the decision, but Dallas is trying to party like it's the 1980s,
the
playing front to
1980s.
back.
Yeah, speaking of that, the 1980s, for anyone that's watching or will watch this recorded broadcast, was the best decade in history. And then we went downhill with the 90s, and then everything went off the hook after. Anyway, I digress. So I get what you're saying. You're saying that reasonable people would agree on the majority of the teams. I would agree with that, but I would say to you that that number would be about 6 teams, at most 8 teams. So what I've argued in the past is that the playoff committee should not set a specific number of teams who make the playoff every year. They should say, in one year, 2 teams might make it. In another year, 20 teams or 15 teams. We're going to pick the teams that have a reasonable chance of winning it all, instead of having this uniform 12-team requirement where we have teams like Indiana and SMU and Boise State who have zero chance of winning. Would you agree that even though it's more nuanced, that might be a better approach?
Well, I mean, frankly, I think that the committee has set a standard,
Yeah.
and they've kind of operationalized how they're going to do things. And I think it rewards teams. I mean, people can say what they want about Boise State, but I'm a believer in the Broncos. I will say they have one. They have
Denver
one loss.
Broncos?
No, the Boise State Broncos.
Well, they do have a blue field.
They do, but that's not. Their one loss is to the number 1 team in the country by 3 points.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Arizona State, Kenny Dillingham has those boys fired up. They're one of the hottest teams in the country, and I think on their day they can beat anybody. Indiana is an interesting case because they're 11-1. You can't leave an 11-1 team who plays in the Power 4 out. You can't. I get their schedule was weak, but Ohio State beat Nebraska by 3. Indiana beat Nebraska by like 40.
True. Very true.
Indiana beat Michigan. Michigan beat Ohio State.
Well, I think you make some really good points that cause me to reconsider, because I think the benefit of what you're arguing is that even if the 12-team playoff may be over-inclusive in including a couple of teams that don't have a realistic chance at winning, it's better to be over-inclusive because you're still going to ensure that you have the best teams in there, but you're also going to put teams in there that you don't know. Like, you just don't know. So maybe that's, it's not like we're leaving teams out. And if the complaint is we're including too many teams, so what? We're still encompassing the best teams. All right, that's a fair point. So here's what I think. I think the goal should be to have the 12 best teams. I don't think this does it. And hey, Mr. GTA, I see you there in the comments. Thanks for being here. South Carolina, to me, has a real chance of winning. I have SEC bias. I'm not sure if your bias is towards the Big 12 or the Big 10, but I think you called on previously, and I believe you're an SEC guy, right?
I am, yeah.
Okay. And what's your Georgia, right?
Yes, correct.
My condolences on Mr. Beck. Let's hope that Gunnar Stockton uses his legs more and throws a bit less. But Georgia looks like a powerhouse. That defense is healthier.
Yep.
And they are a juggernaut.
It hurts. As much as people kind of talk bad about him, and Carson Beck didn't have the best year, I mean, at the end of the day, he still got us here. and it sucks to see the season end with a torn, what is believed to be a torn UCL, which is an injury you almost never see in quarterbacks.
Is the UCL is that the back of the knee?
No, UCL is the elbow. It's the ulterior
elbow.
cruciate. That's when pitchers get Tommy John surgery in baseball. That's what it's repairing.
Is it on his throwing arm?
Yes.
Oh, so he's probably out. The only reason I said knee is because I know the knee has the ACL, LCL, PCL,
MCL.
Yeah. All right, but here's the thing about Beck. He was a little inconsistent this year. Against Alabama, his first half was horrible, but in the second half, he looked like an NFL quarterback, and I think he's going to be a pretty good NFL quarterback. But I don't think Georgia is going to be affected that much, if at all. I think Stockton will do a manageable job, and what's going to win Georgia the national championship is going to be the defense and Etienne and Nate Frazier, as long as he can manage. Yeah. So you're in a good position.
You know, I'd argue we had a bigger loss Saturday, and that was our punter.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Brett Thorson's out for the year with a non-contact injury in his left knee, which I would argue is a much bigger loss to Georgia. Because I mean, that guy, you know, we'd be back up on our own 10, 15-yard line, and he's flipped the field, and all of a sudden we're playing defense from our opponent's 25.
Yeah. Yeah, he reminds me of that Australian punter from the Alabama. Averages over 60 yards a punt or something.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know.
Yeah.
I think I think Georgia when Georgia lost to Alabama, everybody thought Georgia. Alabama owns Georgia. No, Georgia was injured across the board on defense.
Yes,
and I said to my friends, once Georgia gets healthy, watch out. Because if you noticed what happened in Austin and on Saturday, they are making Texas look pedestrian. They're out-physicaling Texas. Yeah. And I think Texas is a very physical team. So I would say Georgia right now, especially with the draw, is in the driver's seat. But I have totally. But I will admit that at the beginning of the year, I made a national championship prediction and then had insults hurled at me. I said Notre Dame's going to win it all this year. And then after Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois, you know, everyone came out of the woodwork calling me crazy, an idiot, and all these things. And sure enough, Notre Dame sits here at number 5. I think Notre Dame's the dark horse to win it all. What do you think?
Yeah, I can see it. They're extremely talented on the ground. With Riley Leonard, Jeremiah Love. They've got really good O-line. That defense is great. That secondary is dangerous. But Notre Dame's problem is, and I've been kind of saying this all year, their competition, while on paper looks good, but I mean, their best wins are Army and Navy.
Yeah.
And I respect the service academies. They had great years, but that's not. I mean, you know, I think they'll probably handle Indiana okay. But even then, Kirk Cignetti, I mean, he's got that team airing the ball out. So that secondary is going to get tested. And then if they win, they come see us in Dallas.
Yep. And that's what I was just going to say, that their secondary is vulnerable. And you even saw that against USC, and USC kept it close. The problem for Notre Dame is if Notre Dame gets by Georgia, I think they're going to win it all. The problem, I think, for Notre Dame, and I think for every team that's going to face Georgia, is Georgia's defensive line and Georgia's schemes on defense. Was it Glenn Schumann? I mean, they cause offensive coordinators so many headaches because of how nuanced their scheme is. But that defensive line, I don't see Notre Dame running on Georgia.
We've got 2 probably top 15 picks coming off either side of the line. Jalen Walker, Mykel Williams. We've got a first-round safety and Malachi Starks. Dalen Everett, for some reason, he is pedestrian all year. And when he plays Texas, he just becomes good at football. So hopefully he can kind of let that ride into the playoffs. But linebackers, Small Munden, C.J. Allen. I mean, we've got fast linebackers, edge rushers that make your day miserable, a secondary that, while shaky, can step up.
Yeah. I think it's back to the old Georgia defense from 2022. I think you guys are healthy now. And I got to tell you, nobody talks about this, but Kirby Smart, in my view, should be a candidate for Coach of the Year. There's a reason he looks so exhausted and stressed out all the time. He had to endure an 8 overtime victory, but because he's got so many moving parts to balance with the injuries and now with Beck, and he's been able to motivate this team where I think Georgia is playing its best ball right now. I would love to see Notre Dame and Georgia. I think we're going to see it, and that will determine if my prediction had any merits. I suspect Georgia wins that game by 13 to 17 points.
I could see it. Listen, Notre Dame, they're ranked at 5. That's really cool. For some reason, the College Football Playoff Committee just forget that week 2 happened. They did not get penalized whatsoever for losing at home to NIU.
No, they didn't. How do you lose? Does Northern Illinois, they actually have a football team?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know too much about it until I saw them go into South Bend. Not only did they beat Notre Dame, they beat them in South Bend. On the other hand, though, South Carolina, the hottest team in the country, with Lenora Sellers, who is on fire right now, and a defense that is playing at an elite level.
Yeah.
Just because they had 3 losses, that's it. And they were stuck behind Ole Miss because Ole Miss beat them. Well, I don't think head-to-head matchups, I think that should matter. But you should also consider other things like the rest of your schedule, particularly at the end of the year. South Carolina should be in this game. And you know what I'd like to see? Instead of Indiana, South Carolina against Notre Dame and South Bend, the winner to play Georgia and Dallas.
That would be fun. But so the problem with South Carolina is, and I've said this kind of all year, they got screwed out of that LSU game.
Oh, that was horrible.
They should be 10-2, if not 11-1, because they should have beat Bama.
Well, in the LSU game, I'm sure you remember when poor Garrett Nussmeier throws that ridiculous interception. He's the South Carolina defender is by the goal line returning the ball, and then one of I believe it was South Carolina's lineman, whoever it was, knocked Nussmeier on his ass. Well, Nussmeier was running to try to defend the play. How is that a personal foul?
It's not. It shouldn't. It is, obviously, but it's not. And it was like they'll call that roughing the passer, but when Gunnar Stockton gets murdered on national television, it's not targeting. So, I mean, it is what it is, and it's already happened. But South Carolina should have won that game. Should have beat Bama. They should be 11-1, honestly. And Georgia at that point, wouldn't even played last weekend.
Yeah.
South Carolina, Georgia should have lost to Florida. Florida's quarterback doesn't get hurt, and I was at the game. And Florida's quarterback doesn't get hurt, we lose that game.
Yeah, that's another thing. Dare I say it, a team with 5 losses someday in some universe might be justified getting a shot because Florida at the end of the year knocked off Ole Miss. And, with that murderous schedule they had.
Oh, my God.
They were probably – I would leave them out probably, but there's an argument that could be made that they would beat Indiana and that they would smoke Boise State. But maybe the Broncos are better than I'm giving them credit for. I think they're really, really good. I did think they looked good against UNLV, but I'm not sure they're among the top 12. I think South Carolina is the one who got screwed, not Alabama. But we'll see how it plays out. I think Georgia's in the best position to win it all. So premature congratulations with cautious optimism.
Yeah.
Thanks for calling to the show. I appreciate it. Please, call in the future. You always make some great comments, and I enjoy the discussion.